He ran away when he found out about her pregnancy. 10 years later, she became a millionaire, and he appeared at her doorstep. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the grand estate, its chime vibrating through the walls of the mansion. A home built on sacrifice, resilience, and the unwavering determination of a woman who refused to be broken. Sophia knew who it was before she even checked. She had seen him in the news recently, though his face had aged, weighed down by time and consequences. His once charming features now carried the lines of a man who had lost more than he ever realized. Alexander Reed. The man who had run away the moment she told him she was pregnant. 10 years. 10 years of silence. 10 years of struggling alone. 10 years of proving over and over that she was enough for their son. And now, here he was, standing on the other side of the door like a ghost from a past she had buried. Sophia hesitated, her fingers grazing the doorknob, her heart pounding in her chest. She could ignore him. She could pretend the past no longer existed. But ignoring ghosts didn't make them disappear. With a slow, controlled breath, she turned the handle and pulled the door open. And there he was. Alex looked older. The youthful arrogance he once carried had dulled into something less sharp, less sure. His once pristine dress shirts and designer shoes had been replaced with something far more modest, wrinkled, slightly worn. His blue eyes flickered with something close to desperation. "Hey, Soph," he said, voice uncertain. Sophia didn't move, didn't react. She simply stared at him, drinking in the reality of his presence. "Can I come in?" She folded her arms. "Why?" He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous tic she still remembered. I know I have no right to be here. I needed to see you." And his voice cracked. "And our son." Sophia's chest tightened. Their son. The child he had abandoned before he was even born. "You don't get to say that," she said coldly. "Not after 10 years. Alex exhaled slowly. "No. I deserve that. But please, just hear me out." She could have slammed the door in his face. Could have told him to disappear, the way he once told her he wasn't ready to be a father before packing his bags and leaving her alone to face the hardest years of her life. But she was no longer that abandoned girl. And she didn't just make decisions for herself anymore. She glanced over her shoulder toward the hallway where her son, Noah, sat in the living room, completely unaware that the man who had helped create him stood on the other side of the door. She sighed. "Come in," she said, but her voice held no warmth. She would hear him out. But she was ready for whatever came next. Alex stepped inside, his eyes scanning the home. It was elegant, yet comfortable, filled with framed pictures, warm light, and a sense of peace that made his chest tighten with regret. He had left Sophia when they were both struggling, assuming she would never make it without him. Clearly he had been wrong. "You've done well for yourself," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia crossed her arms. "I had to." A bitter silence settled between them before Alex finally exhaled. "Look, I know there's nothing I can say that can erase the past. I was a coward. I ran because I was scared. But I've changed, sophomore. I want to make things right." Sophia tilted her head, studying him with an unreadable expression. "Make things right," she repeated. He nodded. "I want to meet him. Our son." Sophia's lips parted slightly, but before she could answer, a voice interrupted them. "Who is that, Mom?" Both turned to see Noah standing at the end of the hallway, his dark curls slightly tousled, a book still in his hands from where he had been reading. His eyes flickered between his mother and the unfamiliar man in the doorway, and then they landed on Alex. Sophia watched her son closely. She had never hidden the truth from him. She never had to, because Noah was smart. He had always been observant, always asked the right questions. He knew about his father. But what Noah did next made Sophia's stomach twist into knots. He didn't run toward Alex. He didn't look confused. Instead, he stared at him with complete and utter indifference. As if he were looking at a stranger. Alex swallowed. "Hey, buddy." His voice was gentle, hesitant. He exhaled shakily. "I'm your dad." Noah blinked slowly, then looked at his mother. "Is he staying for dinner?" Sophia hesitated. "That's up to you." Noah studied Alex for a long moment, his gaze sharp and calculating. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He was 10. And he had spent his entire life without a father. Without this man. Sophia's heart pounded as her son finally shrugged. "I guess he can stay," he said, his voice eerily casual. "But I already know everything about him." Sophia stiffened. And for the first time since he arrived, Alex looked nervous. He frowned. "What do you mean?" Noah walked forward, placed his book on the table, and met Alex's gaze directly. "I've read all of Mom's old letters," he said. "The ones she sent you before she stopped." Alex paled. Sophia didn't move. Noah crossed his arms and continued. "So yeah, I know exactly who you are." A suffocating silence settled over the room. And suddenly, it wasn't Alex who had the power anymore. It was Noah. And the realization of that fact left Alex absolutely terrified. Alex's mouth went dry. His gaze darted to Sophia, as if hoping she would step in and soften the weight of Noah's words. But she didn't. She simply watched, her expression unreadable, letting their son take control of the conversation. Noah stepped closer, unbothered by the tension thickening the air between them. His eyes, a striking blend of Sophia's deep brown and Alex's sharp blue, held no warmth. He was studying Alex, dissecting him in a way that made him feel smaller than he'd ever been in his life. "You ran away," Noah said, his tone calm but heavy with the knowledge of a child forced to grow up knowing half of him had been discarded before he even took his first breath. "She wrote to you for years. Even when you never wrote back, she still told you about me. My first words. My first steps. My first day of school. But you never came." Alex felt his stomach churn. He had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways. Thought maybe Noah would be hesitant but curious. Thought maybe he'd be angry but open. He had never once considered that his son would be so indifferent. He cleared his throat, grasping for words that wouldn't sound as pathetic as he felt. "Noah, I was young. I was scared. I made mistakes. But I swear to you if I could take it all back I would. I was stupid and I regret everything." Noah blinked, his expression unreadable. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached for the book he had set down on the table. Alex recognized it now. A thick leather-bound journal, its edges worn from years of use. Noah flipped to a random page and began to read aloud. "Dear Alex, Noah took his first steps today. He wobbled a little, but he held onto my hands and laughed so hard when he finally got it right. I wish you could have seen it. I wish you could have been here." Noah turned the page. "Dear Alex, Noah's first day of school was today. He was nervous but he was so brave. When the teacher asked what he wanted to be when he grew up, he said, someone who never leaves. I think he already understands more than I want him to." Alex felt like he had been punched in the gut. His legs wobbled slightly, and he had to force himself to stay standing. He had never read these letters, had never opened a single one. Noah's fingers tightened around the journal. "You didn't read them," he said simply. "Not one. Did you?" Alex shook his head, shame burning his throat. "No," he admitted. "I didn't." Noah nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. Then, just as calmly, he closed the book and set it back on the table. "Then there's nothing else to talk about." The finality in his tone sent ice through Alex's veins. He looked at Sophia, pleading silently for something, anything to hold on to. But she only gave him a sad smile, as if she had already made peace with what was happening. "I thought you'd be different," Alex whispered, barely able to get the words out. "I thought maybe you'd want to know me." Noah tilted his head slightly, considering the words before responding. "You don't want to know me," he said. "You want to know the idea of me. The idea that I'll forgive you and we can be a happy little family. But we're not. I've been fine without you. Mom made sure of that." Alex let out a shaky breath, his throat tight. He had come here expecting resistance, but not this. Not the cold certainty of a child who had already made up his mind. Sophia finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "You can't just show up after a decade and expect to rewrite history, Alex. You had your chance. And you walked away." His eyes burned as he swallowed the lump in his throat. "No. But I can't go back and fix the past. I can only try to be here now." Noah stared at him for a long time. His small hands curled into fists at his sides. Then finally he shrugged. "Then maybe you should have tried sooner." The words landed like a dagger to the chest. Alex exhaled sharply, nodding as he stepped back toward the door. He could see it now, clear as day. There was no place for him here. He had been a father in name only. And to Noah that meant nothing. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. Noah didn't say a word. Sophia simply opened the door. And just like that, Alex found himself exactly where he had left them 10 years ago. On the outside. Alone. Alex stood motionless on the doorstep, staring at the life he had never been a part of. The warm glow of the house, the framed pictures on the walls, the quiet certainty in Noah's eyes. It all felt like a world he had no right to step into. A world that had never needed him. He wanted to fight for a place in it. He wanted to beg for a second chance. But how did you fight for something that had already moved on without you? Sophia's hand tightened on the door, her body language making it clear that there was nothing left to say. "Take care of yourself, Alex," she said softly, and before he could respond, she closed the door. A sharp click of the lock followed. Final. Alex stood there for a long time, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. He had spent 10 years running from this moment, but now that it had arrived, he realized something gut-wrenching. Noah had never been waiting for him. Sophia had never been waiting for him. The only person clinging to the past was him. With a heavy exhale, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing against the quiet night. The weight of his choices pressed down on him with every step. For the first time, he wasn't running away. This time, he was simply leaving because there was nowhere else for him to go. Inside the house, Sophia remained by the door, her fingers resting gently against the wood. She had thought this moment would feel triumphant, that seeing Alex finally face the consequences of his abandonment would bring her some kind of closure. But all she felt was a quiet sadness. Not for herself, not even for Alex, but for the years that had been lost. A small hand slid into hers. She looked down to see Noah standing beside her, his expression unreadable. "Are you okay?" he asked. Sophia smiled, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "I should be asking you that." Noah thought for a moment before shrugging. "I knew this would happen," he admitted. "I read those letters a long time ago. I knew who he was before he even showed up." Sophia's heart clenched. "And what do you think of him now?" Noah was quiet for a long moment. Then he let out a small breath. "I think he didn't just leave us. He left himself too." Sophia blinked, surprised at the wisdom in her son's words. She pulled him into a hug, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "You're so much stronger than I ever was at your age," she murmured. Noah let her hold him for a few seconds before pulling back, rolling his eyes. "I'm 10, Mom. Don't get all emotional on me." She laughed, ruffling his hair. Fine, fine. But you still get to pick what we have for dinner tonight. Noah grinned, already heading toward the kitchen. I hope you're ready for pizza and way too much ice cream. Sophia chuckled, shaking her head. I think I can live with that. As they moved further into their home, the past faded behind them, sealed behind the closed door. Alex had left once. This time, it was their turn to leave him behind. And neither of them looked back. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.